Hello everyone, I have some news for you. First of all, I want to wish all the viewers who are Catholic a Merry Christmas. And secondly, the video schedule will change a little bit this week because I have a very long flight. I apologize very much for that. The next video will be released 2 days later, on Thursday, instead of the usual 1 day later, on Wednesday. Well, this video is a fantastic compilation of many theories about our favorite pilot episode of the amazing Digital Circus. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment on this video. Here we go. Everyone has noticed that Jax is a very rude circus resident who never misses an opportunity to hurt or insult someone. It is also noticeable that whenever he speaks, his teeth are clenched. You'd think he'd be a rabbit, and they always have big teeth, but Jax has all his teeth clenched together and he doesn't have a tail. But that's just an interesting fact in case you haven't noticed. I think his teeth are a clear hint from the writer to us that he is saying something, but on the other hand, he is always silent, and all his words are not really spoken by him, but by whoever is controlling him. No one else is so disrespectful to the other circus inhabitants except CAINE, but we'll talk about him later. Our theory is that Jax was a very shy guy in real life, afraid to say anything to another person, and expressed all his emotions while playing with virtual reality goggles. After entering the Digital Circus, Jax immediately became the main target of CAINE, who realized that a character as vulnerable and shy as Jax would not be able to resist. From time to time, CAINE would taunt Jax in various ways, and when he got bored, he would just turn him into a monster and send him to the basement. And the body of our rabbit was used as a shell for the artificial intelligence created by CAINE to at least control everything that happens in the circus, not independently, but having such a loyal and unwavering assistant in the person of the fake Jax. And we'll never see the real Jax again, because no one ever came out of the basement. I think you've noticed that CAINE is connected to every character in some way, and it's not just that. At first glance, CAINE may seem like a kind and cheerful administrator, but that's not really the case. CAINE is just a puppet in the hands of the cruel creator of this circus. Everyone knows that all of the residents except CAINE were once living people who lived in the real world, ate real food, and so on. But once in the circus, their lives are practically over. The general opinion is that CAINE is an artificial intelligence, which I agree with, but only partially. At the moment when the banner appears in front of us, we see a link that leads to some website where we can easily stumble upon an advertisement for some game, and in the background we can see the outline of a man dressed exactly like CAINE. This is a clear indication that everyone is mistaken, that CAINE is an AI. And in fact, he was once one of the developers of the game, but at some point his partner decided that in order to implement his plan, he needed someone who could keep an eye on the project from the inside and not give anyone the slightest chance to get out. In short, someone very clever, but at the same time very evil, decided to create a game for VR goggles, wearing which people start to play, but at what point they enter this very game, and the creator himself is watching from the side and orders his former friend or partner to mock all those who have entered, in return for which the person who became CAINE can exist quietly in the circus and not be bullied. But how the creator was able to bring his friend into the Digital Circus is still a mystery to me. You may argue that CAINE is always trying to think of some fun tasks for the other inhabitants, but imagine being forced to do some useless and uninteresting activity every day without the possibility to refuse. If you try to refuse CAINE, you will be punished immediately, as we clearly saw in the Zooble episode where she refused to look for glowinks. Immediately after she refused, she was immediately torn apart by those very same glowinks. Isn't that weird? And imagine being shown digital food you can't eat every day, or a bed you can't sleep in because there's no such thing as sleep in an amazing Digital Circus. And everything that happens is really liked by whoever is hiding under the role of CAINE, because you can see how enthusiastically he is doing all this. But there is also the possibility that CAINE is really a good man who has gotten himself into a desperate situation, and he only has to bully others to live in peace in this damn circus. After all, constant bullying will drive anyone crazy, and eventually the initially cheerful circus resident will become what Kinger has become. Now I would like to talk about Kinger. This character is one of the main inhabitants of the circus, even if it does not seem so. In one of my videos, I proved that out of all the current characters of the circus, Kinger is the one who has been there the longest, not counting CAINE, of course. Even in the pilot episode, we often noticed that he was already starting to go crazy. I think that trend will continue in the second episode. I think the loss of a loved one in this very circus, as well as the long term, gives Kinger a deeper picture of what's going on around him. In my opinion, Kinger has known for a long time that it is possible to get out of this circus through the very exits that sometimes appear in the show. On the one hand, we can assume that they appear at the will of the administrator, because I already told you that Pomni is an administrator along with CAINE, thanks to which she can easily create exits, but she just doesn't realize it yet. Or, as in any digital system in Amazing Digital Circus, there could be a glitch that causes the characters to randomly open an exit to the real world instead of the virtual one. This brings us back to Kinger. In the new episode, there might be such a glitch, and Kinger will be a witness of it. Trying to enter there, he will, like Pomni in the pilot episode, lose consciousness and stay in the void. But as we know, even in a blacked out state, the character who has been in the void still remembers absolutely everything that happened to him in that very place. CAINE will get a notification on his wacky watch as usual, but the whole situation will have a strong effect on Kinger, making him even more unstable. Now Kinger will start talking about a way out, although we all remember how he mocked Kaufmo for that, even though he knew the way out of the damn circus. With each new scene, Kinger will become more vulnerable and lost, which will eventually lead to Kinger's final descent into madness. And we all know what happens next. Time will come, and Kinger will disappear from the rest of the circus inhabitants. And then, similar to the situation with Kaufmo, he will be found in his room with a lot of strange drawings and inscriptions. And I'm more than sure that one of these drawings will again be a sinister image of CAINE, who this time is chasing Kinger. Kinger will turn into a monster, and CAINE will put him in the basement with the rest of the scattered inhabitants of the Digital Circus. And that, unfortunately, is probably the end of Kinger's story in the amazing Digital Circus. Throughout her videos, she tells us that her soul and intentions are absolutely pure and sincere. But is it really so? Whenever a new character joins the circus, she is the one who comes to their aid and explains what happened to them. Ragatha herself is a reference to Raggedy Ann, but that's just a fun fact. In one of the videos, we talked about the fact that Ragatha is the second longest resident of the circus after Kinger, and she is about 30 years old, which means she has been in the circus for a long time and has been around for a long time. From the last video, you know that Kinger has been in the circus for about 20 years. My guess is that Ragatha entered the Digital Circus at about 15-16 years old, which means she has been in the circus for 15 years. But then why is she in a great mental state while Kinger is completely insane? According to my theory, Ragatha is working with CAINE, and her good girl image is nothing more than an illusion. And in fact, all her kindness is just needed to make the new inhabitants of the circus realize that everything that happens around them is normal, and there is no need to be afraid of it. And in return, she gets a quiet life in the circus. But what if none of this is true, and I have deceived you? It is true, but only partly, because now we come to the most interesting part about Ragatha. She has been in the circus for about 15 years, but the Ragatha we see now is not the same person she used to be. At the beginning of her life in the circus, she was really a kind, good, and sympathetic girl, but also very trusting and naive, which played a cruel joke on her later on. CAINE has always been a cruel villain. We've talked about this many times, but he was very cruel to Ragatha in his time. When Ragatha joined the circus, she didn't understand what was happening to her like everyone else, but at some point she just accepted it and tried to move on with her life. But right at that moment, CAINE decided it was time for him to up his game and started his usual bullying. CAINE fell madly in love with Ragatha, but unfortunately or fortunately, she refused to play every time, which greatly offended our administrator. And this unrequited love became the main reason for the bullying we mentioned earlier. Since Ragatha was not ready for this turn of events, it is clear that her young soul could not survive it, and in the end, Ragatha decided that she could not continue her life in the circus when the main monster of the circus, CAINE, was always with her. We don't know exactly what happened to this sweet and beautiful girl, but she disappeared, and as a result, the circus began to talk about Ragatha's disappearance. In that case, all the other residents could have guessed that something weird was going on and started to riot against the amazing Digital Circus and against CAINE. Realizing this, CAINE decided to create an exact replica of Ragatha and leave her in the circus to quell the panic. However, he gave her all the character traits of the real Ragatha, but modernized them a bit. At the very least, he made the copy of Ragatha obey him unconditionally, and that all her future actions, no matter how good they might be, would be directed only to the fact that, under the guise of calming the other inhabitants, she would actually make them believe that it was impossible to leave this circus, thus frightening them even more, so that they would go mad much sooner than they should have.